All right, welcome back to GTR. My name is Mark, and this is Board Game Throwback, the show where we take a look at the top 10 games for a specific year. And we ask ourselves, hey, will we play these today? Today, I got the one and only, the man, the myth, the legend from GFB, Good Final Bite, my brother, Matthew Moss.
How's it going, buds?
So good. I'm glad to have you here. You've been such an advocate for this show. You love it.
I love this show. I love all the stuff you make, but this is my favorite show on Game to Remember. It checks all the boxes for me. I love games and I love history. And so to take that look back in time is just so awesome. I love it. And the fact that I'm here with you and on this show, it's made my day, my week, my month, maybe even my year.
So glad. And so in honor of you, and our birthdays are in the same month coming up, in honor of you, we're going to look at 1981, your birth year.
There was a heat wave.
There was a heat wave. Never again. So without any further ado, let's go take a look at, would you looky here? If you haven't done so already, please feel free to do so. Head on over to Instagram, give us a follow. You'll find us there at Game to Remember. At the time of this recording, we're at 406 followers. You know what? I'd love to have you as the next one. All right, so let's jump into, the conditions are, if you're new, I go to Board Game Geek, do an advanced search on year, then sort by their current ranking on Board Game Geek, fire open the first 10 tabs, and go through them, and we're going to give you our open, candid, and honest reaction to what we see. So you ready?
I'm ready, bud. I was born ready.
Born in 1981, ready. So number 10 is Black Spy. This is for 3 to 6 players, 45 minutes, ages 14 and up, 1.42 out of 5 on the complexity scale. Designed by Alan Moon, and I feel like I know that name. We'll have to do a little research to see what he's done. What do you think of that cover, though?
I love that cover. That's gorgeous.
Do you think this is the original cover art from 1980? Oh, I guess 1981. That could be.
It could be.
It very well could be.
It reminds me of Dick Tracy.
Oh, yeah. Do you think it's a deduction game or I wonder if it's like a deduction, like a clue type of thing where you're trying to guess who done it? We'll see.
Just one quick question I've always wanted to know. Why is the complexity scale known as weight?
I guess they just define how heavy a game is. Like, I guess it comes from like a heavy Euro game, which is really thinky, really intense, really depth. I guess, weight always has just been a terminology used to define the complexity of a game. Weight.
I like it. It makes total sense.
It makes total sense. The complexity rating says here, community rating, how difficult the game is to understand. Lower rating, higher, lighter rating. Lighter means easier, obviously, but easier to understand. Like, that might be a little generic. Easier to understand. Like, I think the heavier a game is, there's a lot more decisions to be made. I would say there's less luck involved in a game that's heavier, where a game that's light might be like really driven on luck. Like, what are you going to do? You can't strategize luck.
Like, sorry.
Yeah, you're just rolling dice, moving around the board.
Okay.
So that's how I usually define it as. And hard to understand. There's a lot of rule sets in this and that.
Now I know.
Now you know. So this is a card game. So this is a trick-taking game, which is not what I thought it was. So that would be like euchre or something.
Okay.
Rook, something like that. The trick-taking game Black Spy's film noir take on Hearts. Okay. So you want to enlist the best spies you can while avoiding the black spies who will always turn against you. Number of rounds, play. So Hearts is like a classic deck of cards trick-taking game. So this must just be kind of putting a theme on it and then calling it the Black Spy.
I love that art.
I gotta say, those cards look cool. Those look better than a lot of cards in this day and age. It's not complicated. Okay, well, that doesn't look as good. The thing I find, you go on here and you get a lot of the German pictures,
Okay.
and those might be published quite a bit different. Now, this is showing a Z-Man Games 2013. So this must be a reprint of it from Z-Man Games, which is a more modern publisher. So that must be the kind of current art as opposed to some of this other stuff. I'm going to guess. Yeah, that looks more
That looks more.
that looks more 1981. So not as appealing as opposed to the revised edition. But so I think it's just a take on hearts. The highest card in the color leads wins the trick. Points come from the black cards and the black spies, being worth 10 points each, 1 to 5 points. Yeah, it's just a rethemed hearts, so a classic trick taking game. So based on that knowledge and based on what it looks like, would you play the 1981 version? Look at that.
No, just because that would give me nightmares.
That doesn't look appealing.
No.
I think they did a better job at making something look like from 1981 in this later revision.
Yeah, that looks really sharp. I love that cover art.
I'm always willing to play a trick taking game. They're fun. Something like President or Rook or a new modern game is The Crew, which is a cooperative trick taking game. I would absolutely play this. Again, it's just a retheming of Hearts, so nothing that special. Is it worth spending it to get this or just use a deck of cards? I don't know. I just use a deck of cards. Play Hearts. So, we're going to give it a pass. What's your vote?
Yeah, I would pass too.
Give it a pass.
If you can play it with a deck of cards, why spend the extra money? Even though it looks cool, why spend the extra money?
Why spend? So that's number 10, Black Spy. All right, on to number 9 from 1981. We have Dragon Master. This is ranked 3,720 overall. So again, I mean, there's so many games on the list that, like, if you're in the top 1,000, you're doing okay. So this is 3,700. Some of the older games we've looked at are like in the 10,000s, the 12,000s.
And is that overall for the year or overall on the site?
That's just overall on the site where they rank from 1 to, I don't know, 20,000 or something.
Okay, cool.
So, like, all things considered for a game that's released in 1981, that's not too bad. On the then you break it down into the strategy list, and it's almost 1,500. That's not terrible. Fantasy factions face off in a trick-taking card game for battle for plastic gems. So another trick-taking game, 3 to 4 players, 30 minutes, 12 and up, 1.96 out of 5. So Milton Bradley was the publisher. So again, another trick-taking game, but is it based on another intellectual property or is it its own unique thing? It's a trick-taking game based on the older game called Coup d'etat. Coup d'etat. Each player is given a supply of plastic gems which represent points. Each player will get to be the dealer for 5 different hands with slightly different goals for each hand. After all cards have been dealt out, the dealer decides which hand best suits his or her current cards, and the other players are penalized points in the form of crystals for taking certain tricks cards. For instance, if first or last is called, then a player is penalized for taking the first or last tricks. All players will get a chance to be the dealer 5 hands, but other players can steal this opportunity by taking all the tricks during certain hands. At the end of the game, the biggest pile of gems wins the game. So the first thing I think of when I hear that is that new game that I had mentioned, The Crew, which is a cooperative trick-taking game. And so in that game, what you're doing is you might be forced to, you flip over a card, it might be the green 6, and you have to make sure that you take the green 6 in that round. And that can change, and you might have to do it in particular order, and you might have to get 3 or 4 of these orders filled in a particular order. It's an excellent trick-taking game with its kind of own unique theme. But the fact that this says, you have to take the first or last kind of gives me that feeling of you have to not only take tricks, but do them in a particular order. Okay. And that's not something that's done too often, so that seems unique. Again, an older game called Coup d'etat, which I'm not sure what that is. Again, we've got an even older game from 1966.
A political trick taker.
Yeah. So again, I don't think it's a deck of cards thing. This must be kind of the original. This was revamped. And they do that a lot in board games. You take an original game, it gets republished or re-shown as something else with a different theme slot.
Yeah, so the original theme was political.
Political.
Now you're looking at fantasy faction.
Right.
And I'm noticing a pattern. I know 2 doesn't necessarily establish one, but I've noticed in previous years like 79 and 69 there was
Right.
a lot of war games,
Mhm.
and I'm wondering if there's going to be a bunch of trick taking games in the early 80s.
Maybe this is where they came to fruition.
Fruish.
Now, I like this artwork.
Yeah, me too.
I feel like that could be original to the game.
Oh, it certainly could. I mean, I love the fantasy genre in just about anything, movies, books, and games. And that looks super sharp. I actually really love that font too. That's
Isn't that
so
cool?
Yeah.
That's got to be it, because there's the kind of the original box art, and then it's got a bag with gems in it for 1981. I mean, that's stuff you get now in Kickstarters.
Yeah.
When you get stretch goals unlocked, you don't get a bag. So that's pretty cool. Again, trick taking game where you got some conditions to it. Sign me up, bud. This is one that I would add to that list of, can you find it? Throw it on the shelf, because that looks good. It's a classic and got a kind of unique rule set to it. That ticks the boxes for me.
I would definitely play it today. I like trick taking stuff, and I love the artwork. And yeah, absolutely would I play it today? 100%.
Just made the list.
Made the list, but
All right, that's number 9, Dragon Master. Okay, number 8. What do you think we got here? Cry Havoc. 3,032 overall, and this is a war game. You can see the war list here. Ranked 478 overall on the war list. So 2 to 6 players, 120 to 240 minutes. So that's like 4 hours.
yeah.
12 and up, and then 2.27 on the complexity scale. It wasn't published by Avalon Hill Game Company, which is odd, because they had most of them. This is a man-to-man medieval combat war game. Each side is comprised of peasants, sergeants, bills, men-at-arms, and knights. Various scenarios are included to win. So this is a medieval war game. It has dice rolling, grid movement, hex grid, line of sight, modular board. So that line of sight means something like, if you know about Warhammer, where you have the miniatures and they're on the board and you have to be able to see the opponents to fight them, and you're rolling dice to hit them. But line of sight means you got to see them. You could maybe hid behind some structures or whatnot. So, and this might be one of those games where the people make pieces for them, miniatures. Yeah, so this is like old school hex grid. Things are moving. It's 2-dimensional, so these are probably things you can hide behind. These are probably ruins or something.
Okay, yeah.
That you can go in, and the line of sight is blocked by that, I guess. Kind of similar to something, not D&D, that's probably not the right thing, but a Warhammer 40K miniature, tabletop, battle type thing. Those don't really do too much for me. And if I was going to play this, I feel like if you were into this genre of gaming, and you might add it to your collection. But if I wanted to do this with something, I would just play Warhammer, which is modern, has way more invested in the lore and the backstory of it. You're kind of like getting into fantasy novels with board game. So there probably isn't a whole lot of replayability into this, or lore or backstory. It's probably just all contained in a single box. So I would pass. And again, a war game, which I think I've said one. I said yes to one of those so far on this show.
It looks like it's got a good ranking in the war list.
Yeah.
When we were first talking about it, I thought, oh, that looks kind of cool, sounds cool. But once I saw the pictures, I wasn't into the aesthetic of it. And as you mentioned about the lore, it didn't feel like it would take me in, draw me into a story and a narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I don't think I'd play it. But something like that would be cool.
Yeah, like I said, if I wanted to do that, I'd get involved in Warhammer, something that's much more aesthetically pleasing today. You can get into making some terrain, getting into painting miniatures, and you've got access to more modern stuff if you wanted to delve into that. If you were heavy into that, maybe these types of things would interest you and want to kind of collect them. But to use this as a gateway or something to experience the old games, I'm going to leave this one behind. You?
I'm going to leave it at number 8.
Leave it at number 8. So that's number 8, Cry Havoc. Okay, we're on to number 7. And we've got Aces of Aces, Powerhouse Series. Another war game. 318. So this is even higher.
Wow.
2,975 overall. 2 players only. 20 minutes. Ages 12 and up, 1.8. So, interesting. A 20-minute war game that has a really light complexity.
Wow.
That's interesting. What do? It's a aviation flight war game with simulation action selection. Interesting. The Powerhouse Series book set pits the Fokker DVI of George von Hantelmann against the Spad 8. Is that 8?
Yeah.
Of
No, 13.
13, 10, 3. Of Eddie Rickenbacker. This game provides statistics for several other World War II fighter planes that might have played using this set. Is this just a book or something? The Powerhouse books include a different variety of maneuvers. I don't know if this is a game.
It looks, I don't want to say expansion, but it looks like it's, well, I don't know.
What was it called? Dogfight.
Aces of Aces. No, that's 62.
Well, I think we've got ourselves.
We're in a rabbit hole here.
We got ourselves somewhere else here.
Aces of Aces.
Aces of Aces Powerhouse Series. Oh, this is what I. Oh, did I click on an ad or something? No, let's go to the images here. Okay, yeah, dog. I don't know what I'm kind of not knowing what I'm looking at here. Sample rule page.
Yeah, even just the aesthetic of that, I could tell you right now, I wouldn't be reading it. I wouldn't be.
No, I wouldn't be looking at it. And maybe this, like you said, does it expand on something? Is it for something else? It doesn't.
It's like next in a series or something. It's what it seems like.
Yeah. Okay. So it integrates with. Okay, so it's integrates with Aces of Aces, Balloon Buster, Flying Machines. It's in the family of Aces of Aces. Is this the game? It's a one-on-one. I'm at a loss, so I'm going to leave that one right here and say there probably is some more in-depth digging to do, but this looks like it's an add-on or a bolt-on to some sort of war game. I don't know. This doesn't make any sense.
It seems like an anomaly because you see 20 minutes, you see low complexity, you see high ranking in the war list, and fairly high overall, to be totally honest with you.
Yeah.
Just around 3,000.
So, not entirely sure what we're looking at here. Could be our ignorance to war games, which, as we have come to realize, is pretty significant in these latter years. So what are we at? We were gonna play. We're gonna leave this one, leave that one. We're at 1 for 4 now.
Yeah, we're gonna do Dragon Master.
We're gonna play Dragon Master. So we're leaving this one here. So in your birth year, you weren't getting into too many games. That's for sure.
We weren't getting into her, bud.
Oh well, let's see what's in the top. What are we at? 7 here. We're gonna go to 6.
6.
All right, number 6. Car Wars, another war game. Drive offensively the right way. The right of way goes to those with the biggest guns.
Ooh. That sounds like 1981.
Yeah. 2 to 8 players, 45 mins, 10 and up, 3.10 on the complexity rating. Okay, so this is published by Steve Jackson Games. He does stuff like, well, for me, I just think of Munchkin.
Okay.
Munchkin, and so I always think of just like a silly little kitschy game. It doesn't look like necessarily that's what this is, but this is a dice rolling grid movement, impulse movement, modular board type thing. Car Wars is a game featuring freeways of the future in which the right of way goes to those with the biggest guns. Players choose a vehicle, compete with weapons, power plant, suspension, even the body style. You take them out on the road, either to come home as aces or crash and burn. If a driver survives, his abilities improve, and you can earn money to buy bigger and better cars. Okay, you can customize your cars, your trucks, and your bikes. This 1981 best science fiction board game winner. It doesn't seem like it has that big heavy war theme to it. More maybe light and kitschy. like Steve Jackson, but there's clearly is or was a following,
Definitely.
and you're kind of immersing in this, obviously in this environment.
That's the word I was going to use. It's very immersive. Like
Mm-hmm.
you kind of enter into the backstory, you enter into the lore. I think it's called lore, right? Like
Yeah, yeah,
they were saying, like you're building cars and you're going out, and you're either coming back as an ace or you've crashed and burned.
yeah. So kind of that whole, it's not taking itself too seriously. But in 1981, again, I don't know a whole history of Steve Jackson, but this was probably a big like series, all kinds of stuff, expansions and different sets you could get. It was probably pretty big. With that said, I wouldn't know how to get into it, right?
Yeah,
It's not like you're just like these other games. You just if you found it in a flea market, pick it up, play it, and get some fun out of it. I feel like this was an experience that you were involved in the '80s
yeah.
and in the late '80s. So I don't know where to start with it. If someone knew how to do it and had it all and brought it, I wouldn't like some of the other war games. I'd be like, no, I'm not interested. I mean, if you could introduce it, sure, but
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to be on the hunt for these like some of the other ones that I've done.
I would say my interest in this would be to watch somebody play it a little bit,
Sure.
maybe, and tell me about it. But I'm not sure it would even hold my attention for
Mhm.
very long.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it's going to click anything for me
It was, I think it was of the time.
of the time for sure. So that's number 7, Car Wars. So we're going to go into 6, and we've got Dark Tower. So not a war game, so that's good. 2,537 overall, 513 on the thematic list, which like a thematic list would be like games that have the best theme
Mm-hmm.
or are really rich in theme. So that's kind of cool. You hunt for keys, raise an enemy, and storm the tower to victory. 1 to 4 players, best at 4. It says 90 minutes, 10 and up, and pretty low at 1.8 on the complexity scale. Published by the powerhouse Milton Bradley. This is a adventure, exploration, fantasy fighting game with area movement and push your luck. So some kind of gambling, betting type thing where you're just gonna,
Right.
and that's probably why it's so low in the complexity. It's the push your luck type of thing where just the kind of blackjack thing or hit me, see what
Right.
happens next. I don't know what you do, but an epic fantasy quest to recover an ancient magic scepter from the Tyrant King in his dark tower.
Oh, I'm hooked.
Ooh, brought to life in electric form. To vanquish the usurper. I love usurper.
Me too.
Players search the 4 realms of the circular game board for 3 keys to unlock the tower's gate. On this journey, there are battles to be fought against roving bands of brigands, dragons, plagues, and hunger. I'm interested. I'm hooked.
Me too.
There are bazaars to visit to purchase supplies and assistance for the quest. There are uncharted territories to get lost in, and tombs and ruins to plunder. What else is there? And there is mighty army to be raised before the player can lay siege to the tower and fight either to glorious victory or crushing defeat. The synopsis alone makes me want to play the game.
As does it does for me too. It makes me want to. It makes me want to read the book.
Yeah, give me a book. Dark Tower was technologically impressive in 1981. Gameplay was facilitated by a small computer
Ooh.
inside the black plastic shell of the tower itself. Players input their moves on a small membrane keypad each turn, and the computer took over from there.
Oh wow.
This is like an app-assisted game in the 80s. Doing everything from conducting the progress of battles to keeping track of how much or little food was left to feed the players' always hungry warriors. The computer would play brief musical serenades at significant points of the game.
Man, that is cool.
For 1981, that probably blew your mind. Can we get a closer look at this? Okay, so here's probably the app, a modern app that facilitates the which that's cool.
That is cool.
That it's probably still being played today.
Like my jaw is dropped actually.
That this was in 1981. A board game that had a computer in it.
Look at it. Of electronic wizardry.
That's what it would have been like marketed as in the 80s, like the wizardry, the whiz of the computer stuff.
That is
That's
super cool. And there's the keypad, it looks like.
yeah.
And then the computer. Well, yeah, I guess that's the computer.
Yeah, built into the
Oh,
plastic
okay,
tower
now I
thing.
can see it. Not, yeah.
That's
I love that that game was played to death, man. Look at the box, all the
yeah,
scotch tape.
taped up just to contain its
So obviously
immensity.
it had a loyal, I don't want to say a loyal fan base, but a passionate fan base. You know, for someone to play the game so much that the box got so abused,
Yeah,
man, that is cool.
that must have been okay. And then you kind of input your stuff here. That must have been pretty fascinating in 1981. Now, you were born in 1981. I was born in 87. And so I don't have any knowledge of electronics until obviously the 90s ish. So I got to imagine that if you were playing games in 81, this was pretty cool.
Yeah.
With that, hands down, this has to be played, right? You've got to play this.
I think so. And I like it because the complexity rating is fairly low. So I think you could take the game if you found it at a flea market or a yard sale and go home and play it right away and kind of enjoy it and go back in time
Mm-hmm.
and kind of recapture the wonder of this electronic wizardry.
And it's probably pretty low in the complexity because that computer is probably handling some of that stuff.
The artwork.
But yeah, my thing I love to do is look at this old artwork. That stuff is great. What's your favorite one here?
Well, the first one that caught my eye was the food one. Because look at that.
Oh, look at that hawk of ham.
The hawk of ham, and I think that's like loaves of bread, like baguettes.
Mm,
But then I really love that victory. Look at the
where's this?
bottom.
Oh, right
second
here.
one.
Yeah,
That scepter.
I was liking this scout one here.
Oh, that looks cool too.
It looks great.
Man, that honestly, this one's on the list to try to track down.
Track it down. And if you can see back here, we found Sleuth, one of our other board game throwbacks that we tracked down to get. Put this on the list. Dark Tower. And I would imagine the computer, if you found one, the computer probably still works.
Yeah.
Throw a couple AAAs, or well, 1981 is probably the big.
Oh, the big C D
Yeah.
cells.
Probably can't find those over the head of the game.
But it looked like somebody was using a smartphone.
Yeah, you could probably find it, and there's probably app assist for it. That's cool. So that's number 6. Dark Tower would play. Game to remember.
Is it 5 or 6?
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah,
Okay,
6.
yeah, cool.
We're hitting the. We're halfway through here, buds. All right, number 5. Storm over Arnhem. Another war game. Groundbreaking area impulse treatment to the Epic Market Garden Stand. Of the Epic Market Garden Stand. 2 players. 300 minutes, 12 and up, 2.93 in the complexity scale. Who other than the Avalon Hill Game Company? Although the picture looks kind of cool. What do? An area movement, area impulse, dice rolling, movement points simulation. So here's my question. For me in the modern board gaming hobby, like I'm looking for games that stand apart, that do something different. Now, there's only so many combinations of things and mechanisms you can put in a game, but something that does something different or kind of encapsulates something uniquely. How are they selling all of these war games back then? What seems different about this than all of the other war games? This isn't a hex grid, but this probably just has hundreds of those little cardboard squares. Like all of the war games I've seen that have this. Why get this one over another one, right? Unless in the 80s and 90s, like 70s and 80s, you were just people were so into wargaming that you were just always getting whatever war game was coming out. Like, what else was getting released in these years?
So
it's fascinating.
What's the production company again? Avalon Hill?
Avalon Hill Company.
I think in one of your last videos you showed it was like a document or a letter sent by the Avalon Hill Company to that really prolific game creator.
Sid Saxon.
Yeah, Sid. And I noticed in that like all the board of directors for that company, like they all had like looked like they had military
Right.
stripes and pins and everything. Like I wonder if they have military background because all of these different games seem to be based around a battle or you know some specific thing that happened within a
Hmm.
war.
You have to know the content pretty well
I
to
think.
make a game that's immersive. Like in the '80s, if you're being immersed in these games and buying them, you got to know the subject matter. So you might be right there. They must have been, they must have had money, or they were the big publisher. Um, and any guys that were taking on war games or designing war games, they probably took them on and polished them up and published and just cranked them out. But
And I think as a player, you'd have to have a pre-existing interest in
mhm.
the subject too. I mean, two players, and I think it was 300 minutes.
Yeah, and that's like short compared to some of those other
Yeah,
ones. Like took days. So the game begins with the British holding the area around the bridge, surrounded by the Germans, then try to hold out for as long as they can. It's just these like area controlled dice rolling movement. I mean, again, because the interest isn't there for me, you played one, you played them all. But
yeah,
if you loved it, obviously each new story, if you were a war buff,
yeah,
each new story would have to bring you some sort of interest, I would imagine. But
yeah. You'd
man,
you'd be interested in immersing yourself in the scenario.
hmm so that's number 5. Storm over Arnhem must be obviously that must mean something to somebody that knows something about war and whatnot. So that's number 5.
So I hate to rag on this,
Mm,
but I'm pretty sure we're one off.
I think you're right.
I don't want to get to number one
Yeah,
and
yeah,
think
yeah,
it's
yeah.
number two.
I counted this tab
Yeah,
incorrectly.
that's what I thought you did.
So this was number 4.
Four.
4
So
Storm over Arnhem.
so Dark Tower was five, and it was amazing. It's definitely on the list.
It's on the list. Number
Yeah,
5 on the list. Let's close that so we don't get messed up.
yeah.
So number 4, Storm over Arnhem, would not play.
No.
Oh, good thing we got the co-host GFB here.
So um, we're 2 for 7.
2 for 7, which isn't bad.
It's not too bad.
We've had better years. Number 3. Are you surprised?
I was hoping for another trick taking
I
game.
want another trick-taking game at least. So this is ranked 1543 overall, 275 on the war list. B-17, Queen of the Skies. 10 solitaire game of... Okay, and this is a solitaire war game. You're not even going to have fun with some buds.
Yeah.
10 solitaire game of flying a B-17 mission fraught with danger to your crew. I mean, I find a solitaire game, that's got to be hard to be tense. Like a video game is tense because you're immersed in it.
Well, it does say 1 to 2.
1 to 2 players, community 1, best at 1. Maybe you could play with 2. This is a area movement, dice rolling events, paper and pencil ratio combat results table. You're rolling dice, you're looking at a table, you're seeing who won, who didn't win.
You're basically doing your math homework.
You're doing your math homework, which I wouldn't have done. So why am I doing this?
Yeah, the aesthetic of this just doesn't appease or appeal.
Yeah, I feel like I have to take this to school and hand it in.
Yeah.
Nah. Well, what do you?
Let's see what you do.
Let's see what you do at least. See what you do at least. B-17 Queens of the Sky is a war game which recreates the early bombing missions and aerial combat of the B-17 F-model bombers of the U.S. 8th Force over Europe between 1942 and May 1943. Movement to targets is through zones. Dice rolls and game tables determine appearance, type, and position of enemy fighters. Charts are used to determine if hits are made, where the damage is located, and how serious the damage is. Game tables and die rolls also determine everything from the bomber's target information, position to weather, flak, and German fighter opposition as the B-17 makes its way over land and sea to its target. Low complexity, and typically the playing time is generally less than 1 hour after your first few games. Like, rolling dice and looking at tables and doing cross evaluation between the two doesn't seem intriguing.
No. I almost fell asleep when you were reading the description.
Like, I want to see if you can find the chart, maybe. Well, it must be something to do with that plane thing that we saw.
Yeah, there is definitely a theme in this.
This is the yeah.
Yeah, in this year, you have war games, and then you do have like an aerial emphasis.
Mm-hmm. Right.
There was at least two games that had the planes in
Yeah,
them.
Aces of Aces
Yeah,
in this one. So it must be very what period correct, whatever was happening at the time, for a reason for these games to be published like this. But not a lot of interest in this one. Just rolling dice and looking at a chart.
but I mean, it's depicting an event that happened 40 years before, like
Mm-hmm.
in 1942.
Right.
I This is why this show ticks the boxes for me, because I'm so curious as to why these games were published in this year, and what was so,
Mm-hmm.
like, what was going on in the culture for them to be sellers and to be ranked so high.
And obviously, people were buying them. Like if you look at how games are like published today, like people are just trying to find a theme that hasn't been made yet,
Right.
right? But obviously, with so many of these war games, like for them to say, "Oh, are we going to do another war game based on some sort of event?" Like they wouldn't do that nowadays because it's already been done.
Right.
People make games about worker bees and the craziest theme you can think of, so that it has something to stand apart. Obviously, people were buying these, and
Yeah.
obviously, this was influential on the market at that time. Where these, 1981, some sort of aerial combat. I'd be fascinated, or be interested to know why, or what's the cultural context there.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there was like big movies made at
Yeah,
that time.
it'd be so interesting to cross reference games with maybe music, but movies
Yeah.
of the time period to see if there was some cultural influence on what was being published. Interesting thoughts.
That's what I thought about the car game.
The car game, yeah.
Car Wars, yeah.
Yeah. So that's number 3. B-17, Queens of the Skies. I just saw the tab, and I hate to break it to you. I know what number 2 is.
Oh, I've seen this before.
Axis and Allies. This is a classic.
Yeah.
1436 overall, 648 on the war game. But that's kind of surprising. I thought it would be a little bit higher than that. But it's a refight World War II on a global scale with plastic soldiers, tanks, planes, and ships. 2 to 5 players, 180 minutes, 12 and up, 3.04 out of 5 on the complexity scale. This is kind of your classic war game, or one of the classic war games. It depicts World War II on a grand scale. Up to 5 players can play 2 different teams. The Axis, which has Germany and Japan, and the Allies, which has the USA, the United Kingdom, and the USSR. A full map of the world is provided, broken up in various chunks similar to Risk. The game comes with gobs of plastic miniatures that represent various military units during World War II. That's an interesting use of terminology. Players have at their disposal infantry, armors, fighters, bombers, battleships, aircraft carriers, submarines, troop transports, air anti-guns, and factories. They all perform differently and have special functions. Players work together to coordinate offenses and decide how to best utilize their production points. They have the option of risking production resources or the possibility of developing a super technology that might turn the tide of war. Area movement, dice rolling, mini-map resolution, stat check resolution, team-based game. What do you think? Because I think because it is, like you said, you saw this and you recognized it as someone who wouldn't really consider themselves a board gamer. But I don't know if this feels like,
The map, just the United States.
well, that is the United States there. Well, this is Fortress America.
Okay.
I wonder if that sums. There's obviously got to be a ton of. Yeah, here's all Fortress America. Must be a ton of. Well, I don't know. Maybe this. Oh, again, we did this thing again.
Yeah, rabbit hole.
I clicked on images. Bear with. Okay, let's do this. Enormous custom. Okay, that's a wooden framed copy. I just want to kind of see typical early game of Axis and Allies.
I've seen this. Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't know if this might be something like Risk. This seems way more approachable to me though than your classic war game.
Yeah.
But again, just a bunch of those little squares. It looks like Risk. You get those little things set up there.
Those little minifigs. Yeah, the interest I have in this is simply that I have some history with playing Risk and like good memories built around playing that game with friends.
Yeah.
And Axis and Allies was always not Axis. Axis and Allies was always brought up as an option.
Right.
But I think with all the extra components of like submarine ships and air and other tanks, I think we just thought, it was too much to keep track of.
Right. This I think I would play this.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't feel as intimidating as some of those other games. And I mean, it's higher complexity rating. Some of them are even lower, but like the complexity rating doesn't scare me at least. Might just be more stuff to do in your turn, but it doesn't seem as intimidating or as nerdy or as stat checky as some of these other games where you're just rolling dice and crossing stuff off of a chart. There is dice rolling, but it's a team-based game, which was probably to have these cooperative games in 1980s were probably pretty rare. Yeah, I would play it.
Yeah.
This is one of the few war games that I would play because it doesn't feel like those typical ones. So that's number 2, Axis and Allies. Okay, we're on to number 1. The big reveal.
Yes, sir.
You ready for it?
Yeah, bye.
What do you think? War game?
I'm going to guess.
You got her. A House Divided. War between the states of 1861 and 65. This is for 2 players, 240 minutes, 12 and up, 2.64 on the complexity scale. 178 overall on the war list, so we're getting up there. This is a American Civil War post-Napoleon.
Sorry, buddy. I was holding it back. You want us to do the whole thing over?
No. I'll just cut it up. This is an American Civil War post-Napoleonic war game with dice rolling, point-to-point movement, and simulation. A House Divided simulates the epic struggle of the American Civil War that is fought over the twin issues of slavery and states' rights. The period from 1840 to 61 saw these issues brought to boil and became tangled in a terrible war that lasted 4 years. It depicts the war between North and South from First Battle of Bull Run. So, this is real in-depth events that happen.
Yeah.
That these games are modeled after. You don't see anything like that nowadays.
No, not at all.
I don't think anything like that would even sell.
No. No one would know about it.
Or find interest.
Or find interest in it, yeah.
And I think it's a depiction of the culture nowadays. Who would want to get so invested and immersed in these war games? It doesn't make I might be of the minority, but why are you so immersed in these wars? Maybe because of what we've lived through in our current day, and
it's fascinating to me.
I can't understand it.
I never would have thought there would be so many war games.
That is something I've learned in doing this, is that the board gaming hobby as it was 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, was war games.
Wow.
And if, let's say, I would love to know if somebody is older that were in the board gaming community that was in this real niche market.
Mm-hmm.
Board gaming back then was obviously a niche market, nothing like we have today. But have you come through, and are you still in the tabletop board gaming, hobby? And what have the changes been? If you were, I feel like you're probably just still playing these old games. None of these new ones I don't think would interest you if you were into it back. That's I'm fascinated that there is so much historical stuff depicted in these games. Let's see what it looks like, because I think we know it's classic war game. It looks a bit different. It's not just a bunch of boxes, but it's got a bit of shape. But again, just a ton of those little cardboard squares.
Yeah. The little cardboard squares wouldn't interest me. I like the little mini figurines that you get with Risk and Axis and Allies, but I guess A House Divided. Hey, that was that Lincoln.
Well, I think he's there.
Yeah,
that's him there, eh?
It cannot stand.
Yeah, so it doesn't. It's not going to do it for me. And again,
Okay, here's a question,
yeah,
just of interest. Do you think that's the original cover art, like from
I think so.
81?
Like the one we just saw there.
Yeah. Just don't you think that that Lincoln depiction looks like Barack Obama?
Yeah. As big as she goes.
Fascinating to me the amount of war games, and that in 1981 there was still that much interest in the Civil War.
Yeah, right.
So much so to make a game and then for it to be ranked number 1 for that year and so high on the war list.
Yeah, it's the highest ranking game today that was released in '81, and like that's what fascinates me is that game. There'd be no game like that made today. Like this type of depiction of actual war wouldn't happen, but it was just being cranked out in the latter years. So that was your birth year, 1981.
Wow.
We've got nothing but we had, was it 8 war games to 2 trick taking games?
Well, there was 2 fantasy style games, but the one trick taking game was also a fantasy style game.
Right.
Yeah.
So we had predominantly war games. So that is a taste of what the year of 1981 was looking like in the board game hobby. War games upon war games. At least what the current popular games are as they are kind of rated today.
Do you think that that's pretty? Does that reflect what was popular in the year that it was produced, like what the ratings might have been then, or is there even any way to know?
I'm not sure it's, I don't know if this is a total depiction of the top games for that year. If, this was the most popular game in 1981. But, like, the people that, yeah, there might have been other games in the year, and maybe it's so popular to have war games because those are the people that are voting or people that are ranking these games.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
Because this is just all community-based rating.
Okay.
So, like, you've played the game, you rank it. And so the other thing you have to look at is to see how many ratings it has, or how many ratings go into it. So I don't know.
I was going to ask you, what's that blue hex?
So that's like the average rating.
Okay.
So like, so there was 1,910 ratings for this.
Oh, cool.
And the average rating was a 7. Right. So you can see, like, 5 people voted as a 1, but the most people, 800 or 600 people voted it to be 7 out of 10.
Wow.
So
fascinating to me, both ends of the spectrum on those ratings, like why someone would take the time to rate it as a 1.
Yeah.
And then the, what is it, 75 people or so that
10 out of 10
think it's the best game ever.
Yeah, I mean, again, we come into the rating scale is pretty tiny.
It's hard to cool. It's so fascinating.
Yeah. I'd love to know what else was coming out in these years. And like some of the other years we've looked at, there was much different types of games happening. This must just be a big war game year.
Yeah, I think the first episode you did, was it 79?
Yeah.
That was very diverse, I felt.
Yeah.
And only 2 years
prior
before this.
Yeah. A lot of war games in 81.
Interesting.
All right, guys. Well, that's it. Thanks for staying to the end. If you don't mind, hit like, subscribe to the channel. Until next time, peace.
Peace.